Hey everybody, it's Book of Catherine, and I would like to talk to you about tithing. So, tithing is also known as giving or offerings, and almost every religion does it in one way or another. And it is definitely impressed upon in every religion I've seen that a certain amount is expected. And it doesn't mean that everyone does it, but if someone actually really is dedicated to the truth and actually fears God, there is quite a bit that Satan will do to impress upon those who actually fear the Lord to like hurt themselves by giving out of some legalism or some expected idea of how much that you give. And I told a story in one of my recordings recently. I believe it was with Sermon on the Mount. And I told a story about how my husband and I were tithing to a church that we were with, and then we switched the tithing over to another organization when the Lord asked us to, and that we got in trouble with the pastor for doing that. And the other organization, the Sonnenbergs, they actually took my husband and I out to lunch, and we were like, why are we being called by these people? This is crazy. Um, Interestingly enough, I believe the Sonnenbergs were like, we think you should be writing. Like, we think that your health pains will be made better by writing. And I can't say that they were wrong. But eventually the Lord actually asked us to stop, and the Sonnenbergs definitely did not come and hunt us down at all. But they were supportive no matter what we did. And my husband and I moved on and went on to our adventures and followed the Lord after that. The point of me telling that story was to say that this was kind of like where the Lord was leading us to get us off of tithing altogether. I think that if the Lord had told us to tithe, and I'll get into the scripture on this, like on the actual text to back me up on this, is that if he had just told us stop tithing, if he had asked my husband and I to just stop tithing, I don't know if we could have done it. Both of us were raised in organizations that had giving and tithing. I don't know how much our families were giving. I don't think my husband could answer that either. We were both raised in some kind of organized religion where a certain amount was expected every time, and we were supposed to go to weekly attendance. And so then here my husband and I were kind of breaking that by going off and doing jobs that didn't allow us to do weekly attendance. And we were already getting in trouble for that. And then we were tithing because we were trying to be good, and because they had these organizations that told us that we should. They would come in and do things on how to do your money, and we didn't understand at the time that was the wealth gospel of like, if you want the Lord to bless you and give you fruit, that you should be doing this, and here's all the examples why. And they of course didn't use the words of Jesus at all, of saying you can only worship money or God, not both, and the love of one creates contempt for the other. And I can definitely say that, like, I'm starting to see how much money has corrupted our world, and Satan just has to throw money at a person and they'll just throw everything away. You see, if you really start listening for it, you'll notice how often people say everyone can be bought. And I think one of the gods, there's a few gods of this world, and it's money, and it's sex, and it's arrogance. Like, we're either addicted to ourselves, or we're addicted to money, or we're addicted to sex. Like, one of those three factors drives us in throughout all the world. And they all come down to serve pride and ourselves. That's why I say that the world is humanist. Anyway, so I don't think my husband and I could have, if the Lord had told us that, I think we would have thought that Satan was speaking to us or something. We didn't trust, we'd just been taught too much. We've been programmed too much to think that we have to tithe, and if not, something bad is going to happen to us and something will strike us dead. So that was the Lord's way of kind of like weaning us off of our programming. He was a very loving and patient father. So my sharing of all of that wasn't to say, oh, everyone should be tithing. I don't think that at all. In fact, the texts only say that tithing, this idea of giving 10%, like, for example, most places I've seen have said 10% of whatever it is that you earn. And it's not something new. It's not even something that's just about Yahweh. Like, if you look up the days of Pharaoh in Egypt, there are things that said all of the people had to give up 20%. So there's this kind of tithing to the government, or this tax to the government. In Europe today, there's still like mandatory church tithes that go up to 20, even 40% in some places. I think Austria had the highest. It's just there's some crazy taxes. They may have changed since then. The more people have found out. But there's these mandatory taxes. Well, as far as Yahweh goes in Yahovah, if you want to go back to the one true God, he does say in the covenant that's already been finished with the 12 tribes of Israel, it finished when Jesus came and rose again. Then he conquered that covenant, just as Daniel said that he would. He said, an angel came and delivered a prophecy to Daniel that was like, you have only so much of your covenant left. And so it actually says, like when you read the laws of Moses, it says specifically, go read Leviticus 27. Leviticus is all the laws for the Levites, and Levites was of the 12 tribes of Israel. The Levites were the high priest class. They were the class of high priests. And so they were tasked with like taking care of the tabernacle and taking care of the temple and the offerings and all those sorts of things. And that priest class was given a whole set of laws, and including the Jubilee laws that we now have as part of the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible or the Torah, the Tanakh, etc., etc. And Islam claims it and all these things. But if you actually read Leviticus chapter 27, if you actually go ahead and read the law, then it says in there, okay, 1% of this and 1% of this and what, like if you have 10, give one over to the Lord. And if you have 10 of this, give one over to the Lord. So there you kind of read about this law of 1/10. And then at the very bottom of the chapter, it says, and these are the laws given to the tribes of Israel and the chosen by, so just for that tribe. It's not for everyone. There are some laws that the Lord gives for people to go on till the end, and that he gives to the children of Israel, like these songs. And he says, read them until the end of days, or else you'll be cursed. And I don't know any of them that actually do these songs, but the ones of things, I've read through quite a bit of Leviticus and Exodus now, and I've gotten this taste of when the Lord is talking to them and saying, this is the end, do this until the end. And then others that he's just like, this is the law given to the 12 tribes in this covenant. And when he's doing that, that seems to be things that have much more to do with the culture back then, like the farming culture, because it's all about, if you have servants, tithe this much for a servant. Like, don't actually cut off part of the servant's arm. You're supposed to give like this much on the dollar for this servant, if they're age this, give this. If they're age that, give that, which, is something that it fits very much with their culture of the day. And, the personalities that we keep hearing the Lord talk about all throughout Exodus and all throughout Deuteronomy. You hear the Lord constantly talk about the group that left Israel, the slaves that left Egypt. Anyway, so then there are other commands that say until the end of days. And those commands for the Jews are much more, Jews is just the modern, well, it's not really modern. Jews is how came about in the Roman times, because it was Judea. So it was like the Jews, because they're from Judea. That's where it's from. And Judea was named after the Judeans, who was from the tribe of Judah, which is supposed to be the ruling class and the ruling tribe. And so instead of being called the Israelites, they're all called the Judeans, the class of rulers. Anyway, so even though it's one tribe that was supposed to be, the throne of David, that was supposed to be the like they had a family of high priests, this is the family of kings. And so Jesus was eventually born into that same tribe, and then he rules forever. And so that tribe has been ruling forevermore. And so that's why it's such an honored tribe, and why the Jews like to go from something from Judea and Judaism. So is a tribe that goes way back to Germany, when the Judean tribe used to be centered in Germany. And that's where, anyway, there's a whole bunch of history there, and I'll just go off into it. I'm sorry, I'm not doing so great today, but I'm really trying to tape for you because I have had some really bad days. I haven't been able to do anything for you. And so I really wanted to make sure I got something out for you. So I'm sorry. For those of you who don't know, who are new, I have functional neurological disorder, and I have a pretty freaking severe case, but I've come really, really far. Really, really far. So the fact that I'm doing these is such a blessing that I'm doing them. I'm so grateful. But I do ask that you have some patience with me as I go through it. So, anyway, so that law of the 10% comes from Leviticus chapter 27. And that was a law given to the Jews of that time for Israel until the Messiah came and rose again. And then that covenant was fulfilled, the covenant of the 12 tribes. Then the new covenant began, and a second covenant, and that covenant was with the 12 apostles. There are 12 apostles that were chosen by Jesus. They started the next one, which is why when they talk about in the book of Revelations, when they talk about the new earth and the new Jerusalem, the covenants that the 212, the covenants of 12 are totally within that new Jerusalem. It says the foundation of the new Jerusalem, the foundation is of 12 stones, a rainbow of stones. And that rainbow of stones represents the 12 apostles, the second covenant of Christ that brings the Lord to the earth, the Holy Spirit to everyone. It's no longer the Lord just resides with Judea and Judeans and the Israelites. It's now in their temple, and they have the covenant there. Now the Holy Spirit has been set free from that temple. The temple was torn down by the Lord. He split the curtain, and the Holy Spirit went amongst all the earth, and the earth is changed for the better and has become more and more peaceful as time has gone on. And until the time of prophecy came about when Satan returned, and that's all written about in Revelations. So we're into Revelations 21-22 now. And then around the foundation of the New Jerusalem, around the foundation of the 12 apostles in that second covenant, the gates of how you can get to the New Jerusalem are the 12 tribes, the 12 tribes of the first covenant. And you go through these pearl gates, which are like portals. There's 3 on each side, just like the winds of the earth that Enoch talks about. There are 3 winds of the earth, 3 portals that the winds travel to. It talks about in the book of Enoch that there's 3 portals on north, south, east, west that go around the earth. And so when you hear again about 3 portals on north, south, east, west in the new as the New Jerusalem, it's very clear that he's talking about a new earth, and he says a new earth. And so people think it's a city, and I'm like, well, if you bring in all the books that Rome and Judaism kicked out and cut from the books, then you actually bring in the things that are included in like the Vatican Library and the Jewish Library, and that they themselves refer to all the time, like the Book of Enoch, and that were even in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Then a much bigger picture starts to appear, and you're like, wait a minute, they're already talking about gates. This Enoch talks all about gates and portals, and I'm getting way off tithing. So anyway, my point is that that's for the Israelites to worry about. And that covenant was fulfilled. That's all done. Jesus is the offering now. Like that covenant was fulfilled with Jesus. So that's why the temple was torn down. The temple is where people from all over the world, Jews from all over the world, would come under that first covenant, and they'd come to the temple and they'd sacrifice and they make atonement with the Lord 7 times a year, the 7 festivals of the year. Well, why do you think the Lord tore down the temple? He did that because he's like, no more offerings will be given. Jesus was the sacrificial lamb, and he's taking care of all of them. That's why the third temple was built right before the Messiah came. It was true. When the third temple was built, that would bring the Messiah. Well, that's exactly what happened. In 19 CE, Herod tore down Zerubbabel's temple, the second temple, and began building the third temple, Herod's temple. And the first thing he did was build a Temple Mount, which you can still see today. Well, there didn't used to be a Temple Mount until Herod came along. So what was that temple that they had for hundreds of years before Herod and after Babylonian captivity? So Herod's temple was the third and greatest temple that no one thought would be torn down. But that's why everyone was expecting a new Messiah. They knew the third temple has been built. That's it. We tore down that temple, took 10,000 Jews to go ahead and enslave them and build this whole new temple. But they also knew that would bring about the Messiah. And that's why Herod went through and slaughtered all the children of Bethlehem to make sure that the Messiah didn't come. But the Lord woke up Mary and Joseph in the middle of the night and told them to run to Egypt and to hide. And so they escaped it. Like, you can't beat out God. No matter what you think that you can beat God, he is a way better chess player than any of us. Like, way better chess player. So you're not ever going to call his move. You can't. Satan constantly tries to do these evil things, and then glorious things come out of it. You can always see the way that Satan's plan is thwarted. So, like, for example, if do you think I ever would have had a YouTube channel if I hadn't been confined to bed and, had functional neurological disorder? I never would have had. I mean, I had like additions to my business before, and I was a writer before, but writing books is over. Like, the new medium is videos. I remember being like, really? I remember hearing that and being like, no, videos is the new medium. That's where everything is going. And I was like, no, I was writing books at the time. I was like, no, no, no. And then next thing you know, like within 2 years, I was doing videos and I was like, I don't know why I thought that, but that's exactly what happened. But I did videos because I was confined. I couldn't write a book again I guess I did write a book. I was doing really well that year, but that was so hard to do. I wrote a book in 2019 as my first fiction book. And oh, it was so hard to do. And that's why the movies exist now. So, but, yeah, that was so, I can't, I'm working on, okay, off the topic of tithing, need to come back to tithing. Okay. So anyway, my point is that tithing is only mentioned in Leviticus. Some people quote Paul for tithing. Paul was a Pharisee. He was a Pharisee from a city named Taurus. And the people who followed Paul, Jesus actually said, for those who turn Paul away, he praised them in the book of Revelations. He's like, thank you for turning away. You did a good job turning away the apostolic liars. Paul just quotes a bunch of Greek philosophers and Roman philosophers. He says, I don't know the mind of God. And at no time in the book of Acts does it say that he's a prophet. He's not a prophet. He's not a prophet at all. He's just a big legalistic liar who, by the way, first thing he did when he didn't come when Jesus was around. He came all the way down to Galilee when the prophets and the apostles had been going for a year after the death of Jesus. And what's the first thing he did when he got there? He stoned someone. He stoned Stephen. And you know why he didn't keep stoning Stephen? Because they had the power to raise each other from the dead. Like, that's it. So he was like, oh, I guess, okay, they stoned Stephen to death. And then they said this great miracle happened. And it was like, oh, we've got Stephen back in there. He's like, okay, so killing these guys is not going to work. And so maybe I'll just go ahead and get into their ranks. Well, what actually happens when he starts getting into their ranks? All of a sudden, the hidden places that all the homes that these apostles were staying in, look up the dates, they all start dying. Now, of course, they're all risen from the dead. Like, that can't do anything. But it like totally makes the churches start running. And he wasn't accepted. If you go through the early church, they don't actually talk about Paul. Not until the church of, when Rome actually converts, when Constantine and the Council of Nicaea is like, well, we're going to just switch over and say that we're Christians now. And the first thing they did was say that Mary was a god, just like the Queen of Heaven, like Astarte and Asheroth and Asherah and Isis before they made Mary a god, and they just re-Christianized all of paganism and just said, okay, because their big concern was, when you read about the Romans who were upset about the Christians, they were upset that they were losing their money because all of the sacrifices that they made didn't actually go to any gods. The gods didn't actually eat it up. They just took, the aristocracy just took all that money of the tithings that all these people were doing, and they would be like, you're taking all of our money. So they're like, what we'll just do is say we're Christian and then say you got to tithe 10%. And that way they made sure that they kept getting their money. The Christians were not tithing before. That's why they said you cost us all the money, because the Christians were like, Jesus took, the blood on the cross did it. We don't have to sacrifice to our gods anymore. That's why Christianity went like hotcakes. Before, in the pagans, the rich people were taking the, kids' babies and sacrificing them in lieu of their own. That's my whole point. It's very pagan to start tithing. If the Lord wanted us tithing, if he wanted us tithing and giving it up, he would still have a temple up in Jerusalem for us to go to. Okay. And he didn't. He tore down the temple. He tore down the place that everyone came and gave Yahweh their tithing to. And Jesus didn't like that place very much, and he tore it down. So no, you're not supposed to be giving 10% of anything. You're supposed to be following and walking with God. What are you giving it for? Are you saying that Jesus' death was not enough? All right. Love you guys so much. I'll talk to you later, and I'll see you. I think I've got part 6 coming up, and for the Sermon on the Mount Explained. Love you so much. Oh, and if you're tithing to my channel, please don't. I'm not the Lord. I'm not the Lord at all. not the Lord at all. I know I said something like you could really help if you donated, like, what was it, like $1 a monthly? What's wrong with $1 monthly? Do you think that that won't get me my medical treatment? Do you not think that the Lord can provide and move on people to provide that money, or like push ticket sales so that I get a small little piece of that? Please don't tithe to me. Please don't. That, I feel like that's going to curse me. And I know that's not what you want. I am not a God. Do not do that. Do not think that you have any involvement in your salvation whatsoever. You're just going to have to sit down, talk with the Lord, and get to know him. You're just going to have to do it. Don't think your tithing is going to do it. Jesus actually says that. He actually says on the sermon, he actually says that. Reading the book of Matthew, he says, I can just see it now on the day of judgment. He said, millions are going to come to me and says, oh, Jesus, I did all these things for you. And he says, and I'm going to say to you, I never knew you. I don't know you. He's like, you never introduced yourself to me. You never talked to me. You never walked with me. You didn't get to know me. I mean, I can at least joke with, like, my father. Like, I'm so close to my father that, it's not going to be like it'll be amazing when I walk, when I get to heaven or whatever. But, like, just, he's real. It just takes faith to talk to him. Like, it takes a little bit of humility, and that's the way to go. Tithing isn't the way to go. Don't be one of the people that gets to heaven is like, but I gave you 10%. That's the most impersonal thing you could ever do. How in the world is that getting to know Jesus? By just cutting off the money he's given you and being like, here, and giving it to other people. Are you kidding me? And by the way, the money that you're giving, did you know they did like some study and 77 billion was donated from the USA to Africa, and like 5 cents of the dollar got to the people in need? Like, donations don't work out. Like, you're supposed to take care of yourself and your side of the street and walk and talk with the Lord. Don't worry about making a utopia of the world you think you should exist. Knock that off and be interested in the world the Lord's giving you right there, and worry about that. Just what the Lord is giving you. That's enough on its plate. That's enough. He'll give you plenty to deal with. So don't go off thinking that you yourself could be the savior of the world because you've given this chunk of money, and that you're going to get to heaven and you're going to know some of the angels. Are you kidding me? You're not. Money is not the way to the Lord. It doesn't build intimacy. It doesn't build trust. Nothing. You're going to have to actually talk to him. You're just going to have to, if you want to get to know him, so that you meet him like an old friend on that day. Be like, yes, I know you. It shouldn't be a shock when you get to heaven. I mean, yes, it's glamour and glory. But I'm just saying, like, the only way you're going to lose the fear of the Lord is to get to know the Lord and walk and talk with him. Fear shouldn't be. That's why do not fear is the most repeated thing in the body. We're supposed to fear God in more of a reverence way of understanding who he is, just like we fear our own real Father on earth, but not be terrified by him. He's not. He loves us so, so, so much. And we don't give our own dads on earth, we don't give them money. When they expect money from us, it's considered abuse and cruelty. So just please stop. Please stop. All right. If the Lord asks you to get, like, just please, like, there have been times where after we finally stopped tithing, where the Lord's like, okay, we're like, whoa, should we get this or should we get that? We ask him about purchases of this or purchases of that. And, like, we actually talk to him about our finances, like he's our actual financial advisor. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's the one we talk to about things, but we actually talk with him. And that's the difference. That's not considered tithing when the Lord's like, well, can you give this to them or give this? Like, I remember when I was able to go to restaurants, we just asked him every time we went to the restaurant. We'd be like, before like the medical got bad or whatever, those few short years that we had before that, we just ask him, like, well, how much do you want us to tip? And he'd just tell us the amount to tip, and we just tip that. He never said, like, don't leave a tip. He would just give us a different amount every time. And why did we ask him to do that? Because, well, number one, we just knew he knew better. Number two, we knew what was needed. He knew what was coming in our future and what we would need, and he knew what the people there needed. That's what happens when you travel on the road and when you speak just the nature of our life. It required us to go out to in California, that was a big part of our job, was to do these meetings with people. And so we would ask, and sometimes he was like, cover the bill. And we just were like, he knows our finances. It's his bank account, and we'll do what he asks. And we learned a lot about who he is. And we started to kind of get to know him better based on his answers. He won't be a stranger, and there'll be so much more of him to meet, and you end up wanting to just be with him all the time. Isn't that better? Is that better? Because we're going to live most of our lives in heaven on the other side. This is very, very short right here. The longest part of our life will be elsewhere. And you want to start getting comfortable with that now. And handing money over doesn't do that. Just being like, well, I'm just going to do 10%. Never do that to alleviate your guilt. Your guilt is based on the fact that you're not God, and God is much, much greater on us. Don't feel guilty about that. Just be like, all right, well, he did a lot to get to know me. I'm not going to just sit here tiny and quiet and think that he doesn't want to talk to me. If he didn't, then Jesus wouldn't have suffered. Okay? So go back to Eden and start talking to the Father, and don't suck any demons into you or anything like that. Stop that stuff. So no fallen angels. There's plenty of those and plenty of demons. Let's not do any of that. All right. Love you guys so much. Talk to you soon. Bye.